In the cold, grey corridors of Windsor, the silence is no longer just a lack of sound. It is the physical weight of an era ending. You might have seen the headlines, the endless tabloid speculation about Prince Andrew's desperate, behind-the-scenes bid for a comeback. But palace insiders are now confirming something far more definitive and devastating. This is not a simple family spat or a temporary cooling of relations. It is a surgical, administrative strike. Prince William has officially dropped the mask of royal politeness to deliver what high-level courtiers are calling the Final Exile. You are not just witnessing a royal update, you are watching a system reach its absolute breaking point. A future king is standing his ground, finally admitting that the man who holds a dark shadow over this monarchy must be removed, far more permanently than anyone in the inner circle wanted to say out loud. This wasn't just about the scandals of the past. It was about secrecy, the absolute necessity of control, and what happens when the one person who must humanize the crown decides that the palace machine can no longer protect a liability. The first rays of sun had barely touched the ancient stone walls of Royal Lodge when the order was finalized. Staff, typically reserved and rehearsed in their duties, have begun to whisper of a Midnight Memo, a document signed not with a brother's hesitation, but with an heir's cold, institutional resolve. Insiders say the gates were metaphorically sealed the moment William insisted that the Dawn Protocol be invoked. Something clandestine was underway, and it moved with a speed that left the old guard breathless. By the time the public woke up, the decision was already historic. William didn't just manage the optics, he changed the reality of the monarchy's structure. A source confided that while King Charles had grown increasingly weary and sentimental, it was William who grew insistent that certain matters be handled with quiet urgency. Whatever was signed wasn't just ceremonial. It was a seismic shift behind the palace's gilded facade. The air inside the firm, usually serene, was said to be thick with anticipation and unease. William has effectively overruled the lingering sentimentality of the past, reshaping the royal order before the world even realized the old script had been burned. This wasn't a statement. It was a confession that the monarchy can no longer afford to carry the weight of Prince Andrew. For William, the era of protection is over. The era of survival has begun. The transition of power within the House of Windsor has always been a game played in the shadows, but what we are witnessing right now is the emergence of what palace insiders are calling a shadow regency. You have to understand that Prince William is no longer just waiting for the crown. He is already wearing its immense weight behind closed doors. While King Charles remains the symbolic head of state, the operational command of the monarchy has quietly but firmly shifted. High-level sources suggest that the recent invocation of the Dawn Protocol was the final move in a long-term, calculated strategy to insulate the monarchy from its most toxic and radioactive elements. In this world, silence is never just peace. It is a period of intense preparation for a strike that no one sees coming until it is too late. For years, Prince Andrew lived under the delusion that his status as the favorite son provided a permanent, unbreakable shield against the world. He clung to the Royal Lodge as if the very stones of the estate could grant him immunity from the social and legal consequences of his past associations. But William does not see the monarchy as a sentimental family business. He views it as a survivalist institution that must be pruned to stay alive. To the Prince of Wales, Andrew is not just a disgraced relative. He is a structural flaw that threatens the entire foundation of the future he intends to build for his own children. The decision to officially block Andrew's return and solidify his exile wasn't born from a moment of sudden anger. It was the clinical result of months of forensic accounting, legal maneuvering, and the cold realization that the crown's survival depends on the total removal of the disgraced duke. The Midnight Memo was the administrative guillotine. It wasn't just a letter of intent, it was a comprehensive roadmap to strip Andrew of his remaining royal life support. Sources claim that William personally intervened to oversee the removal of security funding, effectively transforming the Royal Lodge from a sanctuary into an island without a bridge. This is the brutal new royal reality. If you are not an active asset to the firm, you are a liability to be liquidated. Behind the gilded gates, the traditional warmth of the family hearth has been replaced by the sterile, blue light of strategic planning. William has replaced the old guard who valued blood loyalty with a new breed of pragmatists who value only institutional integrity. This shift has left Andrew with no one to call and nowhere to turn. His exile is no longer just a social suggestion. It is a total administrative blockade, enforced by the man who will one day hold the ultimate power. The locks have been changed, and the heir apparent is the only one holding the new keys. In the clinical and calculated world of the British monarchy, blood may be thicker than water, but money is the oxygen that keeps the entire institution breathing. What Prince Andrew failed to grasp, and what Prince William has utilized with devastating, surgical precision, is that royalty without resources is merely a ghost of a memory. The final exile is not just a physical displacement from a house, it is a total financial siege designed to starve out the opposition. Palace insiders are now revealing the terrifying details of the financial guillotine, a series of coordinated measures overseen by William to cut Andrew off from both the crown's public and private coffers. For decades, Andrew lived in a state of subsidized luxury, shielded by the sovereign grant and the private wealth of the late Queen. But under William's emerging influence, those purse strings have been pulled so tight they have effectively become a noose. The most public and humiliating blow was the total withdrawal of the 10-man security detail, a cost of nearly $3 million a year that King Charles, under intense pressure from his heir, has now refused to cover. This move was not a simple budget adjustment. It was a loud, clear declaration to the world that Andrew is no longer a protected asset of the firm. William understands that in the unforgiving environment of the 21st century, the public has zero appetite for funding the extravagant lifestyles of disgraced royals. By strategically orchestrating the withdrawal of private funding from the Duchy of Lancaster funds that Charles previously used out of brotherly loyalty to support Andrew's expenses, William has effectively placed the Duke on a restrictive allowance. This allowance is contingent on one thing: total silence and total disappearance. The Royal Lodge, once a symbol of Andrew's status, has now become a crumbling prison of his own making. Without the king's financial backing for the mandatory multi-million-dollar repairs, Andrew is a man living in a mansion he can no longer afford to heat or maintain, guarded by a status that has been stripped of its meaning. This is the new doctrine of the Prince of Wales, using transparency and financial accountability as a weapon of war. By forcing Andrew to face the reality of his own bankruptcy, William is stripping away the last veils of royal immunity. The financial guillotine has fallen, leaving Andrew isolated in a gilded cage of his own pride. The true finality of an exile is not found in the loss of a house or the freezing of a bank account. It is found in the total erasure of a name from the official narrative of a nation. While the financial guillotine has already fallen, Prince William is now deploying a far more subtle and lethal weapon: the total control of public perception. In the digital age, if you do not exist in the official story, you do not exist at all. Palace insiders are describing this as the reputational decommissioning of the Duke of York. William has moved beyond simple damage control. He is now actively managing the disappearance of his uncle from the history of the modern monarchy. You have to understand that for William, the press is no longer an enemy to be feared, but a tool to be wielded. By strategically sanctioning specific leaks to trusted royal correspondents, the Prince of Wales is ensuring that every time Andrew attempts a quiet maneuver for a comeback, it is met with a preemptive strike of negative public sentiment. This is a masterclass in psychological warfare. William is not just blocking Andrew's physical return to royal duties, he is poisoning the very idea of it. Sources within the palace communications team suggest that a new directive has been issued. There is to be no mention of the Duke in any forward-looking briefings regarding the transition of the monarchy. He has been turned into a ghost royal, a figure who haunts the halls of Windsor but possesses no voice in its future. William's refusal to engage in the old never complain, never explain mantra has allowed him to draw a hard line in the sand. Every time a story emerges about Andrew's desperation or his loneliness at Royal Lodge, It is followed almost instantly by a briefing emphasizing William's unwavering commitment to a slimmed-down, accountable monarchy. The contrast is deliberate and devastating. William is essentially telling the public that to support the future king is to reject the disgraced duke. This is the psychological blockade, making the cost of Andrew's presence so high that even his few remaining allies within the family are forced to retreat for their own survival. The fortress of Windsor has not just closed its gates, it has deleted Andrew from its digital archives and its moral future. In William's monarchy, there is no room for nostalgia when it comes to institutional integrity. The most agonizing aspect of any royal exile is not the public shaming or the loss of status, but the systematic fracturing of deep-seated blood ties. Prince William has realized that for the final exile to be truly effective, he cannot simply target the Duke of York in isolation. He must ensure that the entire family ecosystem is reconfigured to exclude him. This is the ultimatum phase of William's strategic takeover. Palace insiders are now describing an environment where the Prince of Wales has made it implicitly clear: loyalty to Andrew is now synonymous with opposition to the future king. This isn't just about cold shoulders at family gatherings. It is about the forced choice between family sentiment and institutional survival. Even the most innocent interactions are now being scrutinized through a clinical lens of strategic alignment. For Andrew's daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, the pressure has reached a breaking point. They have long attempted to navigate the impossible middle ground, remaining loyal to their father while trying to maintain their standing within the firm. However, high-level sources suggest that William has quietly but firmly dismantled that middle ground. The message delivered from the prince's office is unmistakable. Collateral damage is a price he is willing to pay to ensure the crown's purity. By making Andrew a radioactive figure, William has effectively forced the York sisters to distance themselves publicly, to protect their own reputations and the futures of their children. This is the ultimate form of isolation. It is one thing to be rejected by the public. It is quite another to realize that your own family members are being steered away from you by a strategic directive. Even King Charles, caught in the crosshairs of his roles as both a brother and a monarch, finds himself increasingly unable to bridge the gap that William has opened. The Prince of Wales has created a vacuum around Andrew, ensuring that even within the private walls of Windsor, the disgraced Duke finds no refuge, only the deafening silence of a family that has been instructed to move on. This is the brutal reality of the new royal order. The family unit has been replaced by a strategic alliance, and in this alliance, there is no seat at the table for a man who has become a threat to the throne's very existence. Behind the visible conflict and the public shaming lies a far more clinical and terrifying process taking place within the soundproof vaults of Windsor Castle. While the world watches the drama of Royal Lodge, Prince William's legal team, working in coordination with the Grey Men of the Palace, has begun the process of what insiders are calling the constitutional erasure. This is not merely a change in social standing. It is the systematic deconstruction of Prince Andrew's legal existence within the state. In a secret room located deep within the Windsor archives, documents are being drafted that effectively strip away the remaining vestiges of Andrew's royal identity. These are the legal instruments that turn a temporary suspension into a permanent, irreversible exile. You have to understand that in the British monarchy, power is not just held in the hand, it is written into the law, and William is currently rewriting that law to ensure Andrew never has a path back. This legal blockade is focused on the letters patent, the sovereign documents that grant titles and status. High-level sources confirm that William has authorized a forensic review of the obscure 1,917 proclamations to find the exact legal mechanism required to ensure Andrew can never again represent the crown, even in a private capacity. This isn't just a recommendation, it is a legal trap. By creating a new set of internal bylaws, the Prince of Wales is ensuring that any future attempt by Andrew to claim royal protection or financial support would be met with an unassailable wall of palace-approved litigation. The silent wing of the archives has become the center of this operation. housing the leather-bound files that detail the administrative death of a prince. William understands that, for the monarchy to survive, the legal definition of a working royal must be so tightly defined that there is no loophole for the Duke of York to exploit. The most chilling detail leaked from these closed-door sessions is the existence of a finality clause, a document signed in the king's name but drafted under William's direction, which binds the institution to a future without Andrew. This document is said to be stored in the sovereign's private safe, acting as a constitutional insurance policy. It effectively removes Andrew from any ceremonial roles in the event of a regency or a sudden transition of power. William is essentially ghostwriting the next chapter of history before it even happens, ensuring that when he ascends the throne, the problem of Andrew has already been solved by the law. This is the ultimate expression of the Final Exile, a man who is legally disconnected from the very institution he was born to serve. The ink is dry, the vault is locked, and the Duke of York is left standing outside a history that no longer includes him. Within the crumbling, damp-stained walls of Royal Lodge, the atmosphere has shifted from one of stubborn entitlement to one of absolute, suffocating desperation. You have to understand that a man like Prince Andrew does not simply accept a final exile. He perceives it as a temporary inconvenience, a misunderstanding that can be rectified with one well-placed phone call, or a single emotional appeal to his brother's lingering sense of family duty. But as the administrative and financial walls close in, that delusion is being replaced by a frantic, hopeless counterattack. Palace insiders describe a scene of a man under siege, surrounded by a shrinking circle of legal advisors and a few remaining loyalists, who are emboldened more by nostalgia than by reality. Andrew is reportedly attempting to launch what courtiers call the York Resistance, a last-ditch effort to bypass Prince William's blockade and force a face-to-face confrontation with King Charles. This counterattack is fueled by the dangerous belief that blood loyalty still trumps institutional survival. Sources claim that Andrew has been drafting private appeals, bypassing the official digital channels that William now controls, and attempting to use personal couriers to deliver handwritten notes to the king. He is searching for a crack in the Dawn Protocol, a single moment of weakness where he can remind Charles of their shared childhood and the promises made by their late mother. However, every attempt is being intercepted with clinical efficiency. The Prince of Wales has placed a ring of steel around the king's correspondence, ensuring that the ghost royal remains exactly that, a spirit that cannot speak to the living. The psychological toll of this silence is immense. Within Royal Lodge, the Duke of York is said to be pacing the halls of a house he can no longer afford to maintain, clutching at shadows of a status that has been legally and socially liquidated. The most tragic element of this hopeless counterattack is the realization that the world Andrew is trying to return to no longer exists. He is fighting a war against a new generation of royal management that values data, public sentiment, and institutional longevity over the messy, sentimental bonds of the past. While Andrew attempts to leverage old secrets and long-standing alliances, he is finding that the people he once relied on have either been retired or silenced by the new regime. This is the ultimate failure of his resistance. He is shouting into a vacuum. Every desperate leak from his camp about his unfair treatment is met not with a counter-argument, but with a deafening, strategic silence from the palace. William is not fighting Andrew. He is simply waiting for him to realize that the game ended months ago. The York Resistance isn't a threat to the monarchy. It is merely the dying embers of a fire that has already been extinguished by the cold reality of the Final Exile. In the high-stakes survival game of the British monarchy, where every gesture carries the weight of a definitive sentence, the strategic ascent of Catherine, Princess of Wales, has become the final nail in the coffin of Prince Andrew's royal ambitions. You must understand that Prince William is not operating in a vacuum. He possesses a strategic asset whose very existence makes Andrew's presence morally and institutionally untenable. Palace insiders have begun to whisper about the Catherine Doctrine, a fundamental shift where the crown's legitimacy is no longer rooted in mere lineage, but in an absolute, unyielding standard of public conduct and moral purity. Catherine is not just the face of the future, She is the living shield, protecting the monarchy from the stains of the past. William understands that by elevating his wife to the absolute center of the royal narrative, he is effectively suffocating the last remnants of the old guard that Andrew represents. The contrast between the Princess of Wales and the Duke of York is a form of reputational warfare. On one side, you have the embodiment of duty, modern grace, and an untarnished public record. On the other, you have a figure synonymous with outdated privilege and radioactive scandal. William has mastered the art of using Catherine's immense popularity as a clinical tool of exclusion. Every time she appears as the shining beacon of the new monarchy, she serves as a silent, powerful reminder of why characters like Andrew must be permanently erased from the script. Behind the closed doors of Adelaide Cottage, Catherine has evolved from a silent observer into a key strategic advisor. Leaks from the inner circle suggest she has been remarkably firm in her private counsel to both William and King Charles. Any rehabilitation of Andrew is a direct threat to the inheritance of her own children. She is not acting out of personal animosity, but out of a protective instinct for the institution. This is the radiant blockade. By positioning Catherine as the moral compass of the family, William has ensured that Andrew is not just physically exiled, but culturally and symbolically deleted. When Catherine steps into the spotlight, she defines the boundaries of who belongs in the modern royal story, and Andrew is clearly on the outside, looking in. This is why the exile is irreversible. It is signed and sealed by the one person the monarchy cannot afford to lose. Andrew has not merely lost his royal lodge or his security detail, he has lost his place in a history that is currently being rewritten by William and Catherine, a history that has no room for the shadows of the York legacy. The era of the Catherine doctrine has begun, and in this new world, the Duke of York is a ghost that has finally been exorcised. At the heart of this storm sits a man who is no longer just a brother or a father, but the ultimate arbiter of a 1,000-year-old institution. King Charles III finds himself in the most isolated position of his entire reign. You have to understand the profound psychological toll of the final exile on a monarch who spent a lifetime waiting for the crown, only to find that his first major act of sovereign discretion involves the public liquidation of his own brother's dignity. Palace insiders describe a king who is weary, a man reaching the twilight of his life who desperately wanted a reign characterized by harmony and continuity. However, the reality of the William era has imposed a different path. Charles is not just choosing between two family members. He is choosing between his personal heart and his constitutional head. Every signature he places on the documents drafted by William's team is a silent admission that the old ways of royal protection are dead. The Twilight Reckoning is what courtiers are calling this final phase of Charles's decision-making. High-level sources suggest that in his private moments at Highgrove, the king has struggled with the weight of the Dawn Protocol. He remembers the promises made to his late mother, Queen Elizabeth, about looking after Andrew. But those personal oaths are now in direct conflict with the survival of the firm. William has made it clear that a monarchy that protects Andrew is a monarchy that cannot survive the 21st century. This is the ultimate isolation. Charles has realized that his heir is no longer asking for permission. He is setting the terms of the reign. The king's silence is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of surrender to the inevitable tide of history. He has been forced to accept that for the House of Windsor to live, the Duke of York must symbolically die. There is a haunting quality to the current atmosphere at Windsor. It is the feeling of a funeral without a body. Charles has reportedly stopped trying to bridge the gap between William and Andrew, realizing that the bridge has been burned beyond repair. By signing off on the removal of Andrew's security and the freezing of his private funds, Charles has effectively performed an administrative exorcism. He is the man who had to close the door on his own blood to ensure that the crown remains untarnished for the man who will succeed him. This is the loneliness of the sovereign, the realization that the crown always comes first, even if it leaves you sitting alone in a palace full of ghosts. Charles's legacy will now be forever tied to this clinical separation. A king who, in the final hour, chose the institution over the individual and the future over the past. The long, suffocating shadow cast by the Duke of York has finally been eclipsed by the rising sun of a new, uncompromising era. As the dust settles on the Final Exile, it has become clear that Prince William has achieved something far greater than a mere administrative victory. He has performed a successful transplant of the monarchy's moral heart. The Dawn transfer is no longer a clandestine protocol discussed in whispers. It is the lived reality of a modern institution that has chosen survival over sentimentality. You are witnessing the birth of the New Crown Doctrine, a philosophy where the throne is not a family heirloom to be shared, but a sacred trust that must be protected with a cold, almost surgical ruthlessness. Prince William has proven that he is not just the heir apparent. He is the architect of a future that has no room for the radioactive liabilities of the past. The global perception of the British monarchy has shifted seismically. By successfully isolating Andrew and stripping away the last vestiges of his royal protection, William has sent a definitive message to the world and to his own family. The rules have changed. There will be no more gentlemen's agreements, no more private bailouts, and no more immunity for those who threaten the integrity of the Vung Trio. This is the legacy that William is building for Prince George, a monarchy that is slimmed down, professionalized, and utterly accountable. The palace gates have not just been closed, they have been reinforced with a new code of conduct that values the institution above all else. In the silent corridors of Windsor, the ghost of Andrew's influence has been finally exorcised, replaced by the steady, focused command of a man who understands that power, to be enduring, must be clean. As the world looks toward the future, the image of Catherine and William standing at the center of the royal narrative represents a total reset. They are the personification of a monarchy that has survived its greatest internal crisis by choosing the hard truth over the comfortable lie. The final exile of Prince Andrew was the necessary price for this renewal. While the Duke remains a solitary figure within the crumbling walls of Royal Lodge, the institution moves forward with a renewed sense of purpose and a clear, unburdened path. The sun has risen on a monarchy that is no longer haunted by its history, but is instead defined by its resolve. The era of hesitation is over. The era of the new crown has begun, and in this new history, the name of the Duke of York is nothing more than a cautionary footnote. The transition is complete. The future belongs to the vigilant.